So this means we're friends, right? Written by Paisley Wraith. Chapter 2. Hello. Kyle grew used to the ragged kid. His name was Kenneth McCormick, Kenny to anyone who knew him. He was Kyle's age, attended the same university, and also had a younger sibling. He liked bad jokes and singing off-key, had a strange sort of personality that bordered between too quiet and too obnoxious, and was a student in forensic science, which Kyle considered seriously fucking cool. Kenny was bright, cheerful, kind of an asshole, and just fit himself into Kyle's life as neatly as anything. At first, Kyle had been wary. He wasn't a stranger to being hit on, and some people took it to extremes, but Kenny never took it a step too far. They walked to class together. They actually had a few they both attended, and more often than not, Kenny would end up studying with Kyle in the university library. Weirdly enough, he never remembered Kenny inviting himself, or Kyle inviting him. He just sort of fit. Like now, for example, as he scribbled down notes in a truly atrocious handwriting, chewing on his lips rather adorably, as Kyle took glances at him from across the table. Yesterday, Kyle had prodded into Kenny's past to learn that his sister's name was Karen. She was a major in design, and Kenny loved her more than anything in the world. Kyle liked Kenny. Kenny was smart, even if he acted like he was a dumbass. He was driven and kind and genuinely friendly. He was a dork and had a bit of a wild sense of humor for Kyle's taste. This kid was different, and Kyle never clicked with someone like this. It felt like he'd always known Kenny. There was an air of familiarity around him that made him feel comfortable. Kenny glanced up, his concentrated expression curling into a smirk as he noticed Kyle staring. Kyle looked back down, but it was too late. Kenny was grinning, bright enough to light the city itself. "See something you like?" he teasingly flirted, earning a kick from Kyle. "Hey, ouch!" "Don't be an ass," Kyle said absently, hoping his face didn't look as hot as it felt. Sometimes Kenny was too comfortable. He probably shouldn't feel this okay with kicking someone he'd only known for a handful of weeks. Kenny tissed his tongue, taking a swing of whatever sugary strawberry abomination he'd ordered from the campus Starbucks. Kyle wrinkled his nose. Kenny always noticed everything. "Don't make that face at me," he said, eyes twinkling. "Mr. Boring Tea, I would have least pegged you for a coffee guy myself." Kyle wrinkled his nose up further, making Kenny snort. "No," Kenny said, ticking something off on his notebook. Kyle hoped it wasn't some weird list of things he liked. "Yeah, there was a small-town coffee shop where I lived that pretty much ruined coffee for me. Forever." Kyle tried not to think about it. He moved away and honestly would be glad to never go back. Just bad memories left now. "Where did you live?" Kenny asked, resting his chin on his hand as Kyle continued taking diligent notes. "I kind of moved around a lot." "I grew up in this little hick town called South Park," Kyle said, a wry smile on his face. "It's a weird little place, not far from here, but far enough." Kenny was looking at him strangely, eyes narrowed. Kyle met his gaze, arching an eyebrow, waiting. "I was born there, actually," he said, and Kyle set down his pen. "No way," he said staunchly. "I would have remembered you." Kenny's grin grew into something almost manic. "Oh, would you?" he asked, and Kyle's face turned red. The blonde seemed to enjoy that for a second before lifting a shoulder. "I was sent into foster care with Karen when I turned about 8. Was bounced around till I aged out." "Oh, shit." Kyle didn't know what to say to that. "I'm sorry." Kenny shrugged again. "It's not too bad. The families I had were nice. We had a lot of friends. It wasn't horrible. But you've never heard of the McCormick family in South Park?" "I moved there when I was 11, Kyle said, racking his brains. "We lived on the East Coast beforehand. I don't remember." He'd remember. He'd definitely remember. "Where did you live?" "Right across the train tracks," Kenny recalled, chewing on a pencil. "Between the forest and the first road into town from the bus stop." "You're kidding," Kyle said, alarmed. "That's our house." Should he be worried? This was getting creepy. Kenny drew out the word, smiling crookedly. "I doubt that, man. I'm not talking an actual house. We lived in a shack, right next to the forest. We were literally right next to the train tracks." "You mean Kyle bit himself off from saying the word junkyard in a bewildered tone. That place had a shack on it, sure, but it'd be a stretch to call it habitable. Yep. Kenny was looking back down his paper, slight pink coloring his cheeks. That place. Well, no fucking shit then. No wonder he'd been taken away. Kyle searched for something. Anything to say that didn't involve his opinion of how awful that was, or how someone like Kenny didn't belong there, someone so sunny and vibrant among filth and emptiness. Were you and Karen able to stay together? He asked, and Kenny brightened as he did whenever his sister was mentioned. We were actually, he said, a faraway kind of look on his face. She refused to leave me. It made it harder for her, though, I think. She probably would have been adopted quick. She's smart, cute, sweet. I was kind of a roadblock, but... he said, twirling a pencil in his hand. We managed. She's in school, I am too, and everything is fine. She lives off campus, even with a roommate. Kyle digested all of that. Kenny was smart, cute, and sweet in his own right. But the thought of that made his stomach turn. Instead, he went back to writing. Still, it's crazy. South Park. It's a shame we weren't there at the same time. Kyle mentioned, getting Kenny's attention. Hell yeah, he said, cheering up. It would have been cool to be friends. Yeah, Kyle said, staring blankly at the next paragraph. He could see it. Kenny's laid-back personality and sort of raunchy humor next to Kyle's biting sarcasm and short temper would have been a nice match. He hadn't had a lot of friends in school. Handful of enemies. Being the weird northeastern Jewish kid meant a lot of people went after him as an easy target, but he'd gotten used to beating the shit out of other people. It would have been really nice to have Kenny around. Kyle couldn't quite bring himself to say that. Instead, he tapped Kenny's notebook, bringing his attention back to it. The boy rolled his eyes, leaning over it but keeping his gaze on Kyle. So, he said, and the redhead slowly lifted his eyes to meet blue. I was reading your review of the paper before class. I liked the way you word things. For some reason, that made Kyle blush. I used to write for a real newspaper. Kyle brushed off the compliment, feeling flustered. An actual newspaper reporter, not just a school paper. Yeah? Kenny looked interested, leaning forward on his elbows. Like, real reporting, what was it like? It was a lot of fun, he said, a reluctant smile curving his lips. Honestly, I'd love to major in it. I was lucky. I was an intern at first, but... He caught himself. He never really told his classmates, or even his family. But now, he jumped straight in. Kenny was still watching, though, with two blue eyes and fascination. But... he prompted gently, voice softening in encouragement. Kyle shrugged his shoulders. I had a run-in with one of the heroes of the city, he said, biting the inside of his cheek. And, I don't know, they trusted me a little, even that they spoke to me regularly. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Kenny made a timeout motion with his hands. That is way too cool to talk about casually. What hero? Part of the duo Wonder Strike or Super Strike? The Coon? First of all, fuck the fucking Coon. That's not a hero. Kyle said, eyes twitching as he recalled the stories he'd been told by the one person he knew who had met the guy personally. And I meant Mysterion, actually. Kenny looked at him oddly. Kyle, Mysterion isn't a hero. Kyle pointed his pencil directly at the boy. I have at least 7 articles I can recall off the top of my head to argue. I was there personally for a lot of it. He's done more for this city than anyone gives him credit for, but just because he hides in the shadows, people have this preconceived notion that he's not a good guy. He uses excessive violence, Kenny pointed out, looking uncomfortable. Like, breaking spines and shit. He never works with police. Which is why, if you have to be technical, Kyle said, rolling his eyes, he's a vigilante. But remember, I knew him, personally. His heart is in a genuinely good place. He's one of the heroes, more so than the Coon at the very least. Shit. Kenny seemed to digest this, tapping his pen against his chin. Were you friends? He asked, sounding genuinely curious. Kyle hesitated. Everything he didn't want to think about was rushing back. That moment in his living room, Mysterion bleeding and falling asleep on his couch, snuggling into one of Kyle's blankets, kissing him, and then telling him he'd never see him again, and then never talking to Kyle again. "It's not that easy," he said, slowly staring out of one of the large windows. "He doesn't talk to me anymore." Kenny said nothing, and Kyle tried to gather himself back up, shut the door on everything he'd felt, every ounce of hurt and humiliation he'd encounter. So do I have to, fight this guy for your affections or something?" Kenny's teasing voice made Kyle choke on his own tongue, whirling to see the boy grinning over at him. "No," he said, face flaming. "It wasn't like that." Kenny laughed, almost louder than Kyle's exclamation. Having to smother himself in his jacket sleeves, they were both going to get thrown out of the damn library in a second. Kyle watched him irritably until the words clicked. "Fight for your affections." Hold the fuck up. Kyle's irritated, embarrassed gaze turned analytical. That was definitely not platonic. Well, Kenny flirted a lot, for the fun of it seemed. Flirted a whole lot with Kyle. Sometimes blatant, like awful cheesy pickup lines before they walked into Starbucks together, drawing flirtatious smiles in class on pieces of paper he'd shoved into Kyle's notebook, or subtle. The comments earlier about how he liked the way Kyle wrote, or how he openly called Kyle the smartest kid in the class, or the soft kind of smiles he sent his way. Kenny flirted a lot. He thought it was all for play. Maybe not. That was a weird way to word the tease, when literally anything else would have worked. He could have teased Kyle for his supposed relationship with Mysterion without bringing himself into the mix. God, his face must be so red right now. So what if Kenny meant it? Kyle focused on everything he felt. The things that came to mind were purple. A strong, lean figure who turned slowly over his shoulder to glance at Kyle. A fragile trust of someone who was always on the run. Shadows on rooftops, a fleeting figure in an alley. Strength and grace and power. The feeling of a body leaning on him for support. Utter and whole faith in Kyle that he wouldn't let him down. Chapped lips, purposeful and strong. But those things were fleeting. Kyle switched from night to day in his mind. Soft smiles, easy laughter, genuine interest, good-natured teasing, a lifetime of responsibility and strength of a different sort. An easy, comfortable friendship. Interest in Kyle and Kyle alone, not as an informant or a smart kid, but as Kyle, irritable, tired, student, worrying Kyle, who found him smart and funny, interjected himself into Kyle's life and settled there so comfortably. His absence would already be felt. Something promising, strong. Kyle closed his eyes, summoning the dark figure into his mind again, and let go, for someone he could be sure of a friendship from. "Do you want to go out sometime?" Kyle blurted, and Kenny's head shot up from his book. "What?" he said, quickly, with a somewhat frantic look. Oh God, had he read that wrong? Kyle froze. "Would you want to go to dinner or something? With me?" he asked bravely. He didn't have overly long to angst over it. Kenny was turning red himself. "Yes," he answered, suddenly sounding meek. Yes, yep." Kenny's stammering eased Kyle's nerves. The boy grinned, face still colored. "Good," he said, hiding his smile in his palm as he propped up on his chin. "Pick a night. I'll take you on a date." Kenny was silent, slowly pulling his shirt collar up to cover his lips, like he was trying to hide. Kyle tried not to laugh. Hadn't expected that, had you, asshole? He shouldn't feel this elated, right? Kyle tried to dredge up any feelings of regret, and found barely a sliver. Mysterion was a fantasy, a mask with someone behind it he'd never truly know, or even befriend. Kenny was real, tangible, with the same kind of morals Kyle admired, the same strength, selfishness, cleverness, just in someone real, not someone who existed on almost a different plane, cloaked in mystery and shadow, but a kid who grew up in the same town, who took care of his little sister and went to the same school. Real. It was time to put that stupid fantasy behind him. They studied the rest of the hour in relative silence, Kenny in an amazed sort of delight, and Kyle with a comfortable, relaxing sort of happiness.